Hey, here's a funny story. I wanted to review something that was currently airing and went eeny meeny miny mo picking out an anime with the full expectation for it to be complete garbage. And after reading the summary for this show, I thought it would just be another poorly written, average anime where it was just a run-through the perverted fantasy land of some writer. But, much to my surprise, this was not only good, but it was one of the best anime dramas I have ever seen. For the most part, it had really good comedy, the characters were all very unique and likable, and lastly, the drama is on the level of something I would expect from Key, who made such masterpieces such as Clannad. Speaking of Key, this really did feel a lot like a Key anime, in such ways as having a bit of comedy, a main male character surrounded by girls who goes on types of quote-unquote adventures with them, and learns about their tragic past and or current state. Now by this I don't mean that it was a ripoff, but rather it took all the elements that made Key successful and used them to create their own unique story. The story starts off with our main character Yuji wanting to join an ordinary school where he can have an ordinary life, while at the same time we are hinted that the school might not be as ordinary as he hopes. One quick thing I wanted to mention is the animation, which has somewhat of a different look to it. And I could see if some people might see this as a negative, but to me, it looks better than your average anime. The use of gradients is really appealing to look at. The wide range of colors really just makes it pop out at you, and in turn makes it visually stand out against other anime. But it beats me why they wanted to put these horizontal black bars on it. I don't know, maybe like a movie effect or something. Nah. Also, the use of 3D here isn't all that bad. I mean, yeah, it might be a bit glaring at times, but they use it to get some really nice movement that isn't seen in a lot of anime mainly because of the cost. Overall, I really like this unique animation that the anime brought. It was really colorful and refreshing to see. The first thing this anime gets right was the characters, which is good considering they're the most important part of any anime. First of all, with all of the generic main characters out there, I was extremely pleased with Yuji, who contrasts greatly to the generic protagonist who just has no definable traits whatsoever, is just a nice guy, kind of dense, and sometimes somewhat a bit of a pervert. Yuji is cynical, very sharp, level-headed, but at the same time still shows empathy for others. One thing I don't think a lot of writers use effectively is to use humor to construct a character's personality, which thankfully they actually took this concept and used it efficiently here. Yuji has so many times when he just throws out a humorous, cynical response to the world around him. For example, instead of thinking, "Oh gee willikers, what is everybody up to?" Instead he thinks,
では一体何を他に学生が部屋にこもって一人ですることといえば自慰行為か
And this isn't the only case of them showing his personality through comedy. Since he is a very cynical character, this also helps a lot from him falling away from the trap of some characters of this archetype, which is just coming off as a robot. Not only does this show some humor, but it helps define Yuji compared to other characters that have been created. This definitely isn't something that you would picture coming from the mouth of other generic characters. They present him as a cynical character, and then show a case of him actually being cynical. Furthermore, they even show his other traits and just how smart he really is. First with the smaller things like how he tapes a piece of tape at the bottom of his door to try to catch anyone who would have entered. These smaller actions of cleverness helps justify and foreshadow the larger scale ones later on, which are important because those also define his character. Lastly, the anime does effectively create mystery to him. For example, they hint that he does have some kind of weapon with him at the end of the first episode. In addition, a character who is suspicious of him can't find any information on him even after a background check. And lastly, everything he does is really well thought out or just really skilled, and which leaves us the viewer to guess what his full story really is. In short, I was really pleased with Yuji just because of how unique and well crafted he is. Taking a quick break from the characters, let's talk about the comedy. Overall, it was really well crafted. A lot of it comes from Yuji and his reactions from being pushed into several comical situations, and not in the bad way. One of the comedy skits that I really hate in anime is when a character is put into some misunderstanding, and some girl ends up trying to beat him up. This isn't funny because you just see a character getting beat up for something he didn't do. And this also makes the girl seem extremely mean and dense for not understanding the situation. But here, they take the higher route, by having the girl that tries to attack Yuji look like an absolute fool. This is funny because the character who is in the wrong is getting their just desserts, while the innocent victim is showing just disinterest in the attack. There are also several other well-crafted scenes just like this one. This anime definitely has some of my favorite anime comedy in it. Although I have to be honest, while most of the comedy was really good, a few jokes did fall flat on their face and were extremely glaring compared to the rest of the show. If I remember correctly, there's about, give or take 4 of these. And where these fail is because they only rely on perverted shock value, not comedy. Not to mention one of them is a comedic misunderstanding, and guys, I just praised you for not doing this. I don't know, guys. It just kind of has this joke where you basically say, haha, looks like she's in the position to give him a blowjob. This just comes off as immature, not funny. I mean, who really thinks that just putting a perverted joke in here just automatically makes it funny? I mean, there was some ones where at least Yuji can use it as a good line, but the ones that I have in mind don't use that. To be fair, they don't last long and aren't brought up again, but they're still there. Even with this in mind, I still think this anime is really good comedy. I guess a bit of me is just a bit more upset than perhaps I should be, just because of how many of the common failures that this anime fixes. And to be honest, the good stuff is really good, that it is worth sitting through a few couple failed jokes. Okay, well I know I guess I'm gonna have to talk about this eventually. Well, how do I say this in the most professional way possible? Guys, stop psychotically showing the girls panties like it's your mission in life. Let me be clear that I don't like fan service, mainly because it mixes like oil and water in an anime that's main goal is creating an interesting story. Fan service is generally put in just to try to get a large crowd of guys to buy your show, or just because the creators are flat out perverted. Although I guess you could argue that a small percent of the scenes do kind of show the character's personality through them, but most of them, especially the panty shots, completely do not. The result of this being that the show loses dignity. I mean, it is very hard to say that this new amazing drama anime I found has an abundance of panty shots. Some of which take up the whole screen because, you know, that's what I wanted when I came here. But to be fair, this isn't as bad as something as High School of the Dead in this department. I don't think there's enough to ruin the show, but it's still a problem, not a nitpick. This is extremely jarring, especially because of the previously mentioned serious drama this anime has. Luckily, it didn't take the route most fanservice anime do, and I guess technically I might not call this a fanservice anime since it doesn't seem to be the main construction of it, without getting sidetracked, which is having fanservice as an excuse not to try, which results in poorly written characters and uninteresting plots. Alright, enough complaints, because I really did love this anime. It wasn't until episode 4 and onward that I was really amazed. Not that the rest of the show was bad, but this is the reason that I love this anime. Episode 1 properly constructs the setting and introduces the plot and characters. Episode 2 and 3 had the best jokes and some great character interactions, but there wasn't much going on for drama and character development, well, excluding Yuji. But I think the purpose of them was just to let the characters get to know each other a little, and have some good interactions with each other and set up foreshadowing for the later episodes. What was Yuji opening at the end of episode 1? Why did Yumiko attack Yuji? And what was Sachi making? All of these tie into later plot points. Even though I don't think the early episodes were extremely groundbreaking, what they did was set up key foundations so the later drama will work. I never felt like the show lacked foreshadowing, or the premise wasn't constructed, or the characters didn't really know each other. So in that aspect, I guess you could say that yeah, the beginning episodes were a critical foundation for the later drama. Now, the reason the drama was so good was that they gave us a reason to care about the characters, and then also had very dark and well thought out drama. They attack subjects such as rape, neglect, tragic loss of loved ones, suicide, guilt, disease, madness, and a psychological dive into people at a time of crisis, and all of them work. Yes, the drama was dark, but it made more of an impact on us, the viewer. Suppose you were watching a documentary on a tragedy. It would be a pretty forgettable and uninteresting documentary if they just censored anything that was tragic. And that is what makes drama work. It always felt realistic and uncut, like the writers weren't afraid to show some pretty dark stuff. Sometimes I thought, wow, that was really dark and moving. only for them to push the plot further with more of these dark and well thought out elements to a higher degree. This gave it tension as we liked the characters, mainly because of the previously perfectly constructed backstories. And we always know that, yeah, it can get worse. And this is something that the plot isn't afraid to remind us of. Even more impressive is just how well a lot of these plot points build up. Starting small only as things get worse and worse, which just fuels the tension for them. They never just blast it all out at once, but slowly feed you more and more as you wonder how far this will go. Even with Yuji's smarts, the dark seriousness of the plot helped keep the tension the whole time. The anime always hints that not only is this most likely going to turn out bad, but it will turn out worse than you originally thought. Not to mention, on a side note, they thankfully greatly reduced the fan service a lot, which is why I don't consider this a fan service anime. These episodes have a dark tone, characters we actually care about, and great progression. And that is the key to why this drama is so good. You know, the ironic thing here is just what a 180 the characters did in their respective arcs with Yuji. I thought a lot of the characters were funny, but were kind of your basic anime characters, whether that was because the writers just wanted to have them to satirize the typical anime characters, or just because they, well, wanted them. Excluding Yuji, of course. I mean, just by looking at these characters until episode 4, you could easily say, there's the token tsundere, there's the token moe maid, and there's the token main love interest, etc. A good example of this is Michiru, who I thought was just there because the creators wanted to mock the generic tsundere archetype. I mean, one of the funniest scenes in this anime was where the cynical Yuji starts by mocking her by straight up calling her a tsundere, talking the whole time like he's just encountered a new species. But much to my surprise, she had a legitimate reasons for acting the way she did. And like I said, had a really dark and moving drama with her. First, they made her very sympathetic and had good interactions with Yuji. A lot of this coming from her great backstory, which isn't going to be spoiled for you because hint hint, I want you to watch the anime. Dark schemes. After which, they slowly begin the drama by again slowly going more and more dark with the situation. The result of this being a character I only thought was there to mock the generic tsundere to a three-dimensional and well-written character. And this is pretty much the process with the rest of the characters. Each of the other characters don't have much depth to them until they go on an adventure with Yuji, which they then show a sympathetic reason to care about the character, show emotions, good interactions, and lay out a serious drama, with a serious threat coming from the character's past to get them for one reason or another. Although with this in mind, they never feel like they are copying and pasting the same ideas between them. All of the characters have an extremely different backstory. Sure, I guess if you really want me to be critical, you could find maybe a few plot holes in some of these stories, but they were never big enough to ruin the stories. I mean, if you really push me, I guess I could come up with some logical excuses for them. They were never something that was major that completely broke the plot, but more like, I guess, little cracks if you really want to look at them that way. But I can't look at them as anything more than just really close-up nitpicks, especially with just how good the drama elements were before. Another positive they had with these story arcs was just whenever they wanted to actually have a villain, they were always well written and had proper motivation. Yeah, I'm praising the villains for once, the world must be ending. And what they did here is actually give them legitimate motivation and a logical thought process that actually made them seem like real people. One of the cases, they actually did the rich guy right. Finally. And they didn't take him too far or made him feel forced. He never goes out and says something stupid like he's the villain and he loves evil and all that stuff. They were much smarter by having him think that he was the good guy, even going out of his way to yell at the other characters that he didn't do anything wrong. This is realistic because no one thinks that their actions are bad. All people see themselves as right and good whether that's the case or not. The only exception to this would have to be a really well thought out psychopath, and he'd need to be subtle and well thought out, and I'm getting distracted. Anyway. The anime thankfully understands this concept, and a result of this making him seem to be so much more real. Is he a Mountains Deep character? Well, no, he's only there for a couple scenes for one episode, but he doesn't have to be. The whole show isn't focused on him, and he gets what he was set out to do done correctly. The other villain I guess you could say the show has is the case of how you do a proper psychopath. Like I said before, he had proper motivation, which is the tragic death of a close loved one. We even get to see this death happen firsthand, and it isn't forced, and has a lot of focus and thought to it. Now, if you take a villain out and the plot is generally unaffected, the villain is shoehorned in, but thankfully this isn't the case with these villains. The villains were always put in there to advance the plot and the interactions surrounding the dramas. They weren't just there because the writers said they needed a villain for the sake of having a villain. This and everything else I said with the drama makes him work and makes him very threatening. The villains were subtle, realistic, and there for a purpose within the plot, which makes them work. And you know, this is exactly why I love this show so much. It takes a usual setup with what we think are generic characters and then flips them on their heads. Characters that I thought were only there to show extremely well thought out jokes actually had perfect justification for their early typical actions. Amane was fixed on Yuji for a legitimate and tragic reason. Michiru acted like a tsundere for a legitimate and tragic reason. Sachi wears a maid suit for a legitimate and tragic reason. Yeah, you can say that there's way too much panty shots and a couple perverted jokes that don't really have any purpose in them. But it's well worth it. If the problems here are too much panties and not poorly written characters and an uninteresting plot, I'm really happy. Most of the comedy is really good and well thought out. The drama is dark and serious with a perfect progression, all involving characters we actually care about. All with tensions that always feel like they're getting worse and worse. Basically, the plot was just smart and logical. Whether that was because of the villains or just the conflicts the characters were having. And when I said this reminded me of Key, I wasn't kidding, and that was for all the right reasons. Although admittedly, I'm not the best at getting around, I really haven't heard people talk much about this at all, and that's a real shame. I can't recommend this anime enough for people, especially for those who love a good drama. I really hope this anime doesn't go unnoticed, and I'm definitely excited for the second season. This is flat out just one of my new favorite dramas. And welcome to the magical land of Enslade, yet again, where we recommend videos, because that's magical. Anyway, here we go, let's say, and blah 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 blah, Attack on Titan review, that took longer than it should have, and the Black Bullet review, 2 reviews, so much fun, so much magic, you can go on a magical adventure. A very, very magical adventure. Now don't say that's a bad thing or I'll block you.
Shing, sparkle, sparkle.